Go further with the American Express Business Gold Card. Earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels when you book through AmexTravel.com. Whether your destination is a business conference or a client meeting, your purchases will help you earn more points for future trips. Experience more on your travels with Amex Business Gold. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online, sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory. Great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department. It does a great job, whether it happens to be inspections, routine, difficult, quick lane, whatever it may be. All at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. And Josh Getzoff, the outstanding play-by-play voice of the Penguins, joins us. Josh, welcome back. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, great to be with you again, Steve. It's been a while. I always look forward to our chat, so thanks for having me on.
I do want to start with Mike Lange, and his passing. 46 years, and you were the one entrusted to be in that seat, where he was in the TV seat for years, and then, of course, you took over in the radio seat before moving over. And what did Mike Lange and his presence mean to you, and what did you learn from him that's so important that you use even today?
You know, it's a question that I found myself asking myself in the days after his passing, Steve. I mean, I think we all, for differing reasons, right? Whether you were a Penguins fan who watched and listened every single night, or you were somebody who worked within the broadcast realm, from a analyst to a fellow play-by-play to a host, as I was when I first came into the scene, and, engineers, anything like that, producers, directors. A lot of people crossed paths with Mike over his 46 years here, and a lot of people were impacted by him and felt like whether they were physically alongside him or just listening to him or watching him, that they had a relationship with him. And I was one of the very, very lucky people that my relationship was a real beyond, just listening and watching to him. I got to work with him. I got to learn from him. I got to talk to him regularly. And when I think about how much he meant to me, I mean, I said it on the air before our game against the Flyers on Tuesday, and I mean, it's true. I'm not saying anything that's not, that I think anybody who has followed my career with the Penguins wouldn't disagree with, that there's zero chance that I'm in the TV seat right now. There's zero chance I'm probably calling Penguins games, if not for Mike Lange, because he believed in me enough. For whatever reason, when we first met, he took me under his wing and saw something that I didn't even realize that I had, and really coached me along and brought me through the process and made me feel comfortable, and at the same time was a guy that was a sounding board. And from what I've learned, there wasn't always that kind of relationship that he had with a lot of younger broadcasters that he would come across. He was always gracious with his time. He was always willing to talk to young broadcasters and teach them the ways, but the ability that I had to really be with him from our line of work was unique. And I think about him, every day. I thought about him a lot during the game in Philly on Tuesday, just because it was our first that we actually did on Sportsnet Pittsburgh since his passing. And I'll think about him every time I do a game, and it's weird still not to hear from him or not to exchange text messages with him after Penguins games and in between games, and just get his thoughts on various things. So it's sad times, but it's also happy times, because the memories are plentiful with him, and there's a lot of great ones.
Yeah, Josh, there's something when I think when you're a play-by-play voice of a team, that there's a trust between management, coaches, players, and broadcaster, and there's a trust between broadcaster and what the franchise means and the fans. And I felt Mike had that, and you obviously have that. I mean, you get that, but is that something you picked up from Mike about that, how important that trust across the board has to be?
Oh, 100%. I think, one of Mike's biggest things that he said to me when I first got here, this is before I was even calling any games, he said just, the thing about Pittsburgh, and all he could really speak to was Pittsburgh, having done the majority of his career, well, really his whole play-by-play career here, is you got to go where the people are. You got to be physically present. You can't just be the guy calling the games and no one sees or hears from you otherwise. And I really took that to heart. I mean, I understand what he means by that. It's not just talking to fans at games. It's going out in the community. It's being seen and just being engaging when you're around people. And I really believe that that's a big part of the role that we have here. And I know you feel the same way at Penn State. It's when you cross paths with fans, when you cross paths in the community, you want to be somebody who's more than just the guy who calls the games. You want to be a part of the community. You want to be a difference maker within your friends and your neighborhood on a day-to-day basis. And I think Mike was, and he kind of laid the foundation for me to also take that route. Here in Pittsburgh, and my wife and I are really involved in a lot of organizations. It's really become our home, and it's a special place, and he paved the way, in a lot of ways for me to be where it is right now.
All right, so the current team right now, I went to the January 11th game with Ottawa, took children, grandchildren. To be honest with you, John, I know it was a 5-0 Ottawa win, but we had a complete blast. And I want to tell you right now, the Penguins people, ushers, could not have treated us any better. I mean, are we going back? Of course we are. Now, we wanted to see goals.
I wanted to call some that day, too. I remember that game.
Yeah. I mean, when Kachuk and Sanderson were scoring for Team USA, I said, remember, we saw those guys. But the Penguins are in an interesting spot right now between massive youth and older, great, legendary players. How important is this offseason going to be to then try and get the right mix back?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. You use the word interesting. I would say it is interesting. It's also, let's just call it for what it is. It's difficult right now with what the situation is that they have in their organization, because they have obviously missed the playoffs the last 2 years. They're not looking like they're going to snap that streak this year with how far they sit out with about 20 games left to play. They have this mix of players that Kyle Dubas has brought in, I think, with the intention of, potentially seeing if they have a good year and flipping them. And guys that come to mind in that front are Anthony Beauvillier and Matt Grzelcyk. And then you have guys like Noel Acciari that'll be floated out there in the next couple of days to try to be moved around and try to replenish some more of what he's done here over the last year in stockpiling his system and stockpiling his prospect pool. And I will say that he's really transformed that. And I don't know how many people really have paid attention to what he's done on the surface. I think they've seen what he's done on the surface, but I don't know if people have paid attention to what has been happening deeper in that prospect pool over the last, 12 months or so. You really go back to that Jake Gensel trade. This was a group that, when he inherited it, out of 32 teams in the NHL, was routinely ranked 30th or 31st. And there was a reason for that. I think we all know it. First-round picks were mortgaged and sent away for players that could give this team an opportunity to win Stanley Cups. And I don't think anyone regrets those kind of trades. When you're in the moment, you're trying to find a way to get back to the top of the mountain once again. And quite honestly, they owed it to the teams they had at those times to try to go for it. But what they've been able to do here this last year plus is they've had a lot of draft picks. And I think, it's always way too early to tell. But I think what Kyle Dubas has done is he's actually hit on a few of these picks, and that's half the battle. When you have a ton of picks, that's nice, but when you bring in and you select players that clearly have an ability to potentially play at the National Hockey League level and make an impact, that takes it a step further. And he showed the ability to do that when he was at Toronto. He drafted a lot of really good players with the Leafs, but these two drafts he's had here in Pittsburgh, the first was Braden Yeager, who obviously was traded for Rutger McGroarty this past offseason, and Rutger's a part of the Penguins' future, no doubt. I would expect him on the team next year. But then he's got the guys he picked up in the Jake Gensel trade. Billy Koivunen was named the AHL's Rookie of the Month in January and is having a monster year in Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Vasily Ponomarev is more of a grittier guy, but a guy that has seen some time already with the Penguins this year, and I think is a possible option for deeper in the lineup next year. Still a young guy in his career. The draft pick they got for Jake Gensel ended up being Harrison Brunick, and I don't know if you remember this preseason, but that kid almost made the team as an 18-year-old. He blew everybody away, and he's going to be one to watch this summer and going into next year because everyone's excited about his progress. And then, they have Owen Pickering, who showed himself really well in his first dose in the NHL this year. And a couple other guys down there, and Tristan Brose, that's been having a monster year as well. So all of a sudden, this prospect pool is now ranked 17th, and that doesn't sound that good. But when you consider a 14-point jump, and they're going to have at possible two first-round picks this year, at the minimum, they'll have 3 first-round picks in the next 2 years. It's going to only increase. And he said, he wants to turn this thing around in a hurry. He's put himself in a position with all these draft picks to do that because I don't think he's going to use all of them as far as picking players. I think he's going to use some of them to make trades and acquire players. And that obviously could bolster this Penguins roster.
Interesting net situation. What's your impression of Yoel Blomqvist? And I think I saw one of Tristan Jarry's last games as in a Pittsburgh Penguins uniform. What about his status right now?
Yeah, well, it's been a battle for him. I think it's fair to say that, they, in the Penguins' defense and in Tristan's defense, there was a mutual understanding that this guy needed to get himself back on the track field and figure things out. Because it's been a struggle this entire year for him. Really, you go back to last season when Alex Nedeljkovic started the final 12 games of a season that ended up missing the playoffs, including that last game last year in Long Island, which I think raised a lot of eyebrows because they were already eliminated, and the choice was made to go to Nedeljkovic over Tristan Jarry, and I think that kind of spoke volumes of how everyone felt about Tristan at the time then. And, when you look at this season, it just has never really gone the way that I think he or the Penguins mapped out. He's down in Wilkes-Barre. I'd be very surprised, unless there's a couple injuries to the goaltenders, I'd be very surprised if he comes back up to Pittsburgh this year. Right. And I feel like Yoel Blomqvist, when I look at him, is he ready to play in the NHL full-time? Probably not. But not everybody's ready when it comes time to get called up to the NHL, and they got to figure it out. So he's been doing that this year. He's shown flashes. I think he'll benefit from a full off-season workload, and he'll probably go back down to Wilkes-Barre for the Calder Cup playoffs, I would assume, as well. But the goaltending is interesting because they have some good young goalies, Blomqvist being one of them. Sergei Murashov's the one everyone's talking about, who's been deeper in the depth chart, but that's just because of numbers, and has really lit it up in the ECHL and a brief stint in the AHL as well. So we'll see where it goes. Nedeljkovic is under contract next year as well, and Jarry obviously has a few more years left. So there's quite a bit to figure out on that front, but they do have some promising pieces deeper in the arsenal.
Finally, about Four Nations. Now, next year it's the Olympics in Milan Corvino, and the NHL will be there for the first time since 2014. What did that do, Four Nations, for hockey in this country, especially when it was juxtaposed against the NBA All-Star Weekend, which was not exactly a winning show?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, the NHL's had a lot of All-Star weekends that went at the root of the NBA, and I think that was part of the thinking with the Four Nations. And, man, they hit it out of the park. I have to be honest, I was one of the people going into that tournament. Not that I wasn't going to watch, but I had zero expectation that it would reach the level of intensity or attention that it did over that 10-week span. But you couldn't look away. It was amazing. It was the best hockey I've seen in a long time. They called it best on best. I still am one of those people that kind of says hand up. It's not truly best on best with some of the countries that were not involved. But for what they had in that tournament, and I think everyone can agree the two best countries in the world right now are the U.S. and Canada. To have them face off twice on different stages, and then that final go to overtime. I mean, it was unbelievable hockey. It was exceptional to watch. For the teams to come together so quickly was impressive. I actually spent a lot of time yesterday with Mike Sullivan, and we were talking about the tournament, and he was just blown away by it. And he said, the juices that it got flowing for the Olympics, both internally for USA Hockey, but also around the world, it was palpable coming out of it. And people are excited, and it's going to have a lot of energy going into Italy next winter. But I will say, one thing that Mike Sullivan said was pretty interesting, and I would agree with him, is that because of the attention that this tournament got and because of the excitement that this tournament generated, much like some of these previous U.S. hockey teams, this group of guys that just played these 4 games over the span of 10 days, 11 days, there's young kids in the United States that just watch that happen that want to play hockey right now.
Yeah.
And that are jumping into hockey. And that's the best kind of impact in that stage, in that short span that you could hope for. And I think they nailed it.
I think they nailed it as well, because all I know is that when I wasn't doing basketball, I was sitting there watching 3 hours of hockey. So, Josh, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time and your thoughts on Mike. And I know you've got a lot going on, and we appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Yeah, anytime. Great to talk to you again, Stephen. I'm sure we'll catch up down the line.
Sounds great. The outstanding Josh Getzoff, the great play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll wrap it up in a moment here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.
This winter has been cold, but Sunbury Motors Hyundai says, let's be alive in 2025 and heat things up with their huge selection of new Hyundais now. Hurry into SMC and drive away in a 2025 Hyundai Elantra for under $22,000. That's right, a 2025 Elantra starts at just $21,728 with up to $1,792 off or 3.99% financing for 60 months. And there's 22 to choose from. 2025 all-wheel drive Hyundai Tucsons start at only $29,161. With up to $27,414 off or 2.49% financing for 60 months. And there's 42 available. Sunbury Motors continues to be this area's midsize SUV leader with up to $6,524 off the newly redesigned 2024 Hyundai Santa Fe's or 2.99% financing for 72 months, and they start at only $40,431. They have 5 that must go now, and all have America's best warranty. Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.